the first thing I do is I encourage, I'm genuinely interested in hearing what they have to say and their story, and I'm genuinely interested in the exchange that they have with their patients. My goal initially is to get their story out and to create, again, a sense of safety. And as they begin to come out with it, they start to, after a little bit of time, they start to have other thoughts. They aren't limited. It's when they're pressed, then they constrict their thinking. So if you create a receptive environment, I think that they begin to think, well, yeah, and I had this reaction to the patient. I was really mad about it. And then, and if I might say, well, so what was happening before all this began, or what was going on in the patient's life, or how have you done anything to change the nature of the relationship? I begin to ask some questions that might point to some kind of activator for the patient, a trigger of some kind. And so what we try to do first is to see, is there anything in the interaction itself that has kind of, quotes, inspired the patient to go after the therapist, to withdraw from the therapist. Jeremy Safran has written a lot about this. Aside from Tanzi Burke, there have been people who've talked about the nature of how to handle patient's resistance and so forth. There's many roads to this, to Rome here, and we're talking about one road that I found to be helpful, but there are many different roads. So I think there's something about the patient, the student or the therapist begins to think differently. They begin to now think about more variables that have influenced the patient. And I think, as you were talking about it, I think they're recognizing that they're part of the situation. They can't leave themselves out. And that frequently is the problem. When they leave themselves out, then they're kind of often doomed to kind of repeat the impasse because they're continuing to do what they've done. If we go back to Huckleberry Finn, he made it, that was a great discovery. In trying to make it better, I've made it worse. And when the therapist begins to be able to notice that, they then can be able to start to make things better. That is, by not continuing to intervene in the way that they've intervened. So I think there is something about the patient getting that message from the now newly born therapist, so to speak, and it's obviously a dramatization, but the therapist really who is now more able to tolerate certain painful states of mind with the patient without reacting to it, because they've had some practice in going over it in the learning experience. So you get acquainted with your inner self in a classroom. It's not psychotherapy, but it's a kind of guided tour of your reactions. And by the way, that frequently is helped by other students who also say, yeah, I felt that way, and they begin to join in. And all of a sudden, I've found that other students provide incredibly thoughtful observations to the presenting student and do so in a very respectful way. It isn't that they're the smartest, but they are equally recognizing what being on that page is like. So again, this is what I think allows the patient to begin to feel that the environment has changed. The gravity is different. There's something new happening. And those are sometimes, they're hard to necessarily pin down, but they're very critical. And I think we know it when we see it. And everybody knows it, I think, when they see it in a relationship where somehow somebody turned a corner. One of the warring partners saw something that was aggravating the situation and acknowledged it. And hopefully, in some situations, the other party so deeply appreciates being heard and understood that they stop the war themselves, that they begin to think about it, hopefully, but that there are possibilities with people and then there are limitations with people.